The first day at a new school was supposed to feel exciting, but for him it was a knot in his stomach, a storm inside his chest. He was small, unusually small, the kind of small that made people pause when they first saw him, the kind of small that made whispers travel like wildfire in hallways. He held his backpack straps tightly as though gripping them would give him courage, and he stepped through the iron gates into a courtyard already buzzing with teenagers who seemed taller, louder, and more confident than him. A group of boys near the lockers noticed him first. "Hey, look," one of them muttered, nudging his friend, "new kid, pocket-sized edition." The other snickered, and soon the laughter spread. He felt his cheeks flush but kept walking, pretending not to hear. He had learned over years that if you reacted, it only got worse. Still, every laugh was like a pin pricking at his confidence. Inside the classroom, he slid into the seat at the far corner of the front row, hoping invisibility might be possible. The teacher began roll call, her voice sharp and rhythmic. When she called his name and he answered with a quiet "here," someone at the back whispered loudly enough for the room to hear, "Here but can't reach the desk." A wave of laughter followed. He bit his lip, staring at the wood grain of the desk, willing the moment to pass. The teacher, oblivious to the sting of it, simply continued. Lunch break was no easier. He waited patiently in the cafeteria line, balancing a tray almost as wide as his torso, when a tall boy shoved past him. "Careful, champ," the boy smirked. "Don't want that tray to crush you." Another added, "He should be in the elementary line, not here." They laughed, moving ahead as if he wasn't even there. He found an empty table in the corner, sat alone, and picked at his sandwich while pretending to focus on the posters plastered across the cafeteria walls. It felt like everyone's eyes were on him, mocking, dissecting. When he went home that evening, his mother asked gently, "How was your first day?" He forced a smile, replying, "It was fine. Teachers seemed nice." He didn't want her to worry, didn't want to see the concern crease her forehead the way it always did whenever he mentioned difficulty. Later that night, in the quiet of his small room, he opened a notebook that he used like a diary. His handwriting was neat, small like him, but full of determination. He wrote, "They laughed at me today. A lot. But I will not give up. One day I will prove that I am more than this size. My height is not a weakness, it will be my strength." The next day in class, the bullying continued. A boy grabbed his notebook and held it above his head, taunting, "Come on, little guy, jump for it." The class roared with laughter as he stretched on tiptoes, finally snatching it back with burning cheeks. The teacher walked in just as he sat down, completely unaware of what had happened. Later during math, when a complicated equation appeared on the board and silence filled the room, the teacher sighed, "Doesn't anyone know how to approach this?" Slowly, cautiously, his hand rose. The teacher looked surprised but nodded. "Come on, let's see what you've got." He walked to the front, asked for a stool, and climbed up to reach the board. The room hushed as his chalk scratched confidently across the black surface, line by line solving the problem. When he wrote the final answer and circled it, the teacher clapped. "Correct. Well done." For the first time, the class didn't laugh. Some looked astonished, others almost impressed. One boy muttered, "He's like a mini Einstein." It was meant to be mocking, but the tone had shifted slightly, there was respect hidden under the sarcasm. From that day on, he decided that if they were going to talk about him, he'd give them something real to talk about. He spent his breaks in the library, devouring books on science, math, and stories of great thinkers who had been underestimated. While others played soccer in the fields, he sat by the tall windows, a stack of books beside him, a notebook open for scribbled ideas. Teachers began to notice his eagerness, the way he always raised his hand, the way his answers carried not just facts but creativity. One afternoon in science, a classmate struggled with an experiment, wires tangled and circuits refusing to light. The teacher scolded the boy for not paying attention. When the teacher left, he walked over quietly. "Want me to show you?" At first, the boy scoffed. "Why would I need help from you?" But frustration made him relent, and he watched as the small boy patiently rearranged the wires, explaining, "Think of electricity like water. It needs a clear path to flow. Right now your pipe is blocked. He switched the wires, the bulb lit up, and the boy's eyes widened. That actually makes sense. For the first time, someone in class looked at him not with ridicule, but gratitude. Word spread slowly that he had a knack for explaining things in ways that were easy to understand. Students who had laughed before now lingered after lessons, pretending to tie their shoelaces until they could quietly ask, "Hey, could you show me how you solved that problem?" He always said yes. Still, the bullies didn't give up. Their leader, a tall boy with a sharp voice and sharper temper, cornered him one afternoon. "So you think you're a genius now? Teaching everyone, acting like you're some professor?" He met the bully's eyes and simply said, "I don't think I'm better than anyone. I just think differently. And I want to help." The bully scoffed, shoving past him, but his words lingered like a seed planted in soil. For now, though, the tension remained, a storm waiting to break. He returned home every evening exhausted but with a growing fire in his heart. In his diary he wrote, "They may laugh less now, but it's not enough. I have to show them, all of them, that I am not here to survive. I am here to change this place." He didn't know yet how, but he believed it with every fiber of his being. Days turned into weeks, and slowly the whispers in the hallways began to change. He was no longer just the target of jokes, he was becoming the one people sought when confusion clouded their notebooks. It started small, with one boy after science class saying, "Hey, could you explain that circuit thing again?" Then another girl in math hesitated near his desk before mumbling, "I didn't get the fractions problem, could you maybe?" He smiled and nodded every time, never once saying no, never once reminding them of the times they had laughed. Instead, he used analogies, stories, and tricks that made even the hardest subjects feel like puzzles that could be solved. One afternoon in the library, a group gathered around his table. He drew diagrams on scrap paper, turning physics into rivers and dams, turning history dates into a timeline shaped like a journey, making everything less intimidating. For the first time, the library was lively, filled with murmurs of learning instead of lonely silence. Even teachers noticed the shift. One remarked during class, "It seems some of you are finally catching up, whatever you're doing, keep it up." Eyes flicked toward him, and he felt a strange mix of pride and shyness. But not everyone was happy with the change. The bully, tall and broad-shouldered, watched his growing influence with irritation. "You all treat him like some savior," he sneered to his friends. "He's just small and desperate for attention." But even within the bully's circle, cracks were forming. One of his closest friends had secretly approached the boy for help with math. He had been failing quietly, too embarrassed to admit it, until desperation pushed him. The small boy explained patiently, using coins as fractions and a clock face to demonstrate angles. When the friend finally solved the problem on his own, he whispered, "Thanks, man. If I'd asked anyone else, they'd have laughed." That gratitude was something the bully couldn't ignore when his friend told him later. Still, pride was a cage he couldn't yet break. Weeks later, the bully himself faced a crisis. In English class, he was assigned to give a presentation. He tried, stammering through the first few sentences, but his notes were a mess and his voice cracked. Laughter erupted, not at the small boy this time, but at him. The teacher sighed, marking something on her sheet, and said, "You really need to put in more effort." Humiliated, the bully sat down, fists clenched under the desk. After class, when the room emptied, the small boy lingered. He walked up and quietly said, "If you want, I can help you prepare next time." The bully snapped, "I don't need your pity." But the boy only shrugged. "It's not pity. It's practice. Everyone struggles with something." He turned to leave, but those words stayed like a stone in the bully's shoe. That night, staring at his messy notes, the bully felt a reluctant tug. The next morning, he cornered the small boy near the lockers and muttered, "Fine. Teach me. But if you tell anyone, you'll regret it." The boy nodded calmly. "Deal." They began meeting in the library after school. At first, the bully sat with his arms crossed, rolling his eyes at the simple exercises. But as the boy broke down paragraphs into building blocks, explained tone as if it were music, and coached him to breathe between sentences, the bully realized he was improving. Slowly, he stopped rolling his eyes. One afternoon, after practicing a speech 3 times, he looked at the boy and admitted, "This actually helps. I don't know why you bother though. After all the crap I gave you." The boy looked at him steadily. "Because everyone deserves a chance to be better. You gave me plenty of reasons to hate you. But I'd rather give you one reason to change." The bully had no response. For the first time, he felt something break inside his chest, something that had been hardened for years. On presentation day, he stood in front of the class with a steadier voice. He paused where he was supposed to, looked at the audience instead of his shoes, and delivered his piece. The teacher blinked in surprise, then smiled. "Much improved. Well done." The class clapped politely, and though it wasn't thunderous applause, it was enough. As he sat down, he glanced at the small boy, who gave him a quiet nod. He felt a strange warmth in his chest, not the rush of victory in a fight, but something cleaner, something better. Meanwhile, more students began joining the study sessions. At lunch, instead of sitting alone, the boy now found himself surrounded by peers scribbling notes, asking questions, laughing not at him, but with him. "How do you make it sound so easy?" one girl asked after he explained a chemistry reaction using a cooking recipe as an example. He chuckled. "Because learning should feel like cooking, you mix things together until something new happens." They laughed, but the concept stuck. Word spread to other classes, and soon even juniors and seniors began peeking into the library to listen. The teachers noticed, and one day the principal herself visited. She watched quietly from the doorway as the boy drew on the board, explaining geometry by comparing it to the angles of a soccer field. Students leaned forward, engaged, some even smiling. Later, she told the teachers, "Whatever he's doing, it's working better than most of our methods." Still, he didn't let the praise get to his head. Each night he went home, tired but fulfilled, writing in his diary, "They are starting to see me, not for my height, not for their jokes, but for my ideas." Maybe this is how change begins, one problem solved, one mind opened. Yet even with this progress, he knew the road wasn't smooth. Some students still mocked quietly, whispering nicknames when they thought he couldn't hear. But the difference was that now, others defended him. Once, when someone muttered "dwarf genius" under their breath, another classmate snapped back, "At least he's actually helping us." "What have you done?" For the first time, someone else bore his shield, and he felt the weight on his shoulders lighten. Even the bully's circle softened. One by one, they started showing up at the study sessions, pretending they were there by accident until it became obvious they wanted to learn too. And slowly, the leader himself began to change. One evening after another library session, he stayed behind and said quietly, "You know, I used to think being strong meant making others feel small. But you're smaller than me, yet somehow you make everyone around you feel bigger. How do you do that?" The boy smiled. "Strength isn't about size. It's about how you lift others up, not push them down." The bully looked away, swallowing hard. He didn't admit it out loud, but in that moment he realized he no longer hated the boy. He respected him. And that respect was spreading through the school like a silent revolution.